S10 Blazer junk. I'm going to post these videos now that I've sort of got a bit of a respite from the disaster. Looked on Craigslist forever and ever. Every four-wheel drive, every this, every that. Half the vehicles are already sold. Half of them don't get back to you, whether you text them or call them or whatever. So we got this thing. It came into a repair shop with probably a bad intake gasket, leaked coolant into the cylinders, and it's a typical problem on the 4.3s and the 5.3s, and I guess the 4.8s and the 6 liters have the same plastic intake manifold gaskets, and they fail. So if you don't catch it, you blow the engine. The shop bought it from the customer, who had done tons of repairs over the years, and they rebuilt the engine. The transmission had been redone a year earlier. They said they opened it up, I don't know, shifts really weakly, but it shifts. Overdrive is real soft. Lockup, fourth gear, lockup, whatever. So I bought it, had 100 miles on it, and I started it up and drove it around, and it sounded all right, but it had a little noise. Now, of course, hindsight being the miserable thing that it is, 2020, it's been sitting now for a couple hours. I'll tell you the rest of the story in a minute. Doors are locked with the key ignition. When you start it up in the morning, it raps for half a second. So let's hear that. Yep, it's been sitting for just an hour, and it raps for half a second. So we get off the highway in Beaumont, Texas to fill it up with gas. And I get back on the highway and I say, "Hey, Miss Hip Chick, is your window open?" I hear something rattling, like a window molding, door molding, something is rattling. She says, "My window's closed." So I pull over a couple miles down the road and I put gas in it. And just for fun, I rev the motor because I had heard at 2,000 RPM a little noise. Well, after driving 80 miles an hour for several hours, that's the speed limit in Texas. Now the oil is thick now. We've been off the road for an hour, so let's listen to this. What is that? People said it could be a broken flywheel. No, because a broken flywheel, when you turn off the engine, would rock, tick, tick, and it wouldn't make noise at only 2,000 RPM. I think it would make it all the time or more often. This thing sounds like it's got a bad rod bearing or similar problem, probably a connecting rod bearing, because it only makes it when you accelerate, whereas the flywheel would tighten up if it was cracked, shattered, and this thing had just been installed, so I don't think they would have put a bad flywheel in. They were a reputable shop. I've also called him 10 times and texted him, and he's not answering my calls. So his dream came true. He rebuilt it. It had a noise. Fan just disengaged. Fan clutch. He sent it down the road, and 1,500 miles away from his shop, it got a lot worse. Oil pressure's been low. 39 pounds, just below 40 when you're cruising at 70, 75 miles an hour. I had the oil changed. Oil pressure went up a touch, but closer to 40 than it was. I'm going to put the camera underneath near the oil pan, and maybe you'll hear it more clearly through the alloy oil pan. Maybe a rod will go right through the block. Soak my phone. Ready? Unless you've taken apart hundreds of engines, I've only taken apart a few, handful. I think that's a connecting rod. I had a Ford 351M 400 that had that, and it eventually seized up. It wasn't very long. So I think it's got a bad rod bearing. I don't know. You could guess all day long. I don't think it's a flywheel. There's also an issue on one of the forums I was reading. The guys were saying if you have a horizontally installed oil filter, the drain back valves are pretty crappy. But this is not an oil drain back problem. Interestingly, the harmonic is not going in a circle, wobbling slightly. I don't know if the camera will pick it up. There's the EGR. That's the code I got. EGR, an electric EGR pump. And a horizontal oil filter on the earlier 4.3s. The oil filter was over here. When they went to fuel injection, they put the air filter here and mounted the oil filter underneath. So we drove from New Orleans. We drove from New Orleans to Baton Rouge because to rent a car to get back to the Adirondacks in upstate New York was half the price. Hey, Miss Hip Chick.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're hanging around with me, buying these junk vehicles. So from New Orleans, we drove from Slidell, we drove 85 miles, 140 something kilometers to the storage yard, 10 miles, 15 kilometers from the airport. Got an Uber ride for $18. First day on the job for this guy from Iraq. They drove us to the airport, took a couple of wrong turns. We rented a car, this junk Hyundai, which is an upgrade. Ha ha ha, I'll show you in a minute. We're parking it here for $29 a month plus $15 administration fee.
Give me the key. You don't have to let everybody know everything.
I'm not telling them that I also bought this Cadillac. Baton Rouge had huge floods this past summer, and everything you see was flooded. Every house, every storage locker, the water was up 3 feet high. So at this storage yard, people do car repairs, they store tons of junk. If the vehicles were good when they came here, they were junk because everything was flooded here. The water was this high. They had huge floods, 21 inches of rain, whatever that is in centimeters or millimeters or aquameters or Newton meters. They had lots of rain. I saw the water line on one of the buildings. It was up to here. We're talking waist deep water. So everything here is flooded. Just saw a truck place that had a sign saying no flooded trucks. Well, they got them from somewhere else because everything you see here, unless it was on a trailer, got flooded. So then we go rent a car at the airport, and they tell you if the tank's not full when you bring it back, they charge you $6, $7, $8, $9 a gallon. I said, no, we'll fill it up, but I always fill it up as soon as you leave the airport. And I did a couple miles away, and it took almost 3 gallons to fill it. That's the good tire. Yep. And you figure for a $368 rental, you get better than bald tires. That's pretty close to the wear bar, if you ask me. That's a 30-second from the wear bar. Yeah, you rent a car and they give it to you with bald tires. I had that happen last year. I rented a car and the tires were worse than this, and it was winter. And I said, tires are bald. The woman says, we just had it inspected at the Ford dealership right next door. I said, well, you know, you can open your eyes and look. Tires are bald. You don't have to be a genius or an inspector to figure that out. Valve caps are missing. Well, somebody added air to it. How's that tire? Half of its useful life. Texas. We were there. Had it towed from Beaumont, Texas. You'll see that in the other videos. The episode we had at the gas station in Beaumont, Texas, just outside of Beaumont. Tow truck came, picked us up. I said, hey buddy, check your U-joint. I see lots of rust. He says, what? I noticed something. I greased it. Well, there was no grease on it. He greased it in his other life. So, I had to switch tow trucks and take a 200-mile, 300-kilometer drive in the most obnoxious tow truck. Wow, was this thing rough. I was hunched over, my back was hurting me. Come on back, beep, beep. It was a rough ride in a junk tow truck with 1,000,000 miles, but we made it. Guy was super nice. And we're parked in our parking spot. Close up all the windows. And hopefully we'll be back sometime to pick up this check engine soon, EGR. Check engine soon Blazer with 149,000 miles. Leave a couple pens, a couple of gas bills. Lock her up. And $1 a day storage. Lots of junk here. Hopefully when I come back the wheels will still be on it. It's got wheel locks. I'll just pick the window and find the locking key, which I hid. Interesting story, so I'll post the rest of the videos now that we're kind of sort of on our way. Big ride back. And feel every bump in the road. Hyundai Elantra. Yeah, that's an upgrade. Right. Upgrade my you-know-what.